Well, Thrive Collective family, welcome back. This is your show designed to help you make more money, avoid costly mistakes, and fully integrate your faith into your life and leadership. I am Rob Hughes, your host, and it is an honor to serve you through this platform. I am so excited for our guest today. Today, I've got Certified EOS Implementer Justin Maust with us. He's a speaker, trainer, coach with the John Maxwell team. He owns a small business himself with Rackley Restoration. And really, in a given week, Justin spends about 90% of his time helping other business owners implement the EOS system into their world, into their ecosystem, to get real simple business results. And the other 10% he spends running his business and implementing EOS tools inside of Rackley Restoration. The thing I just am so impressed with about Justin is he also loves Jesus deeply. And he is fully committed to seeing the kingdom expand through his business and is really structured in such a way to see that happen. And so it's just an honor to have Justin into today's show. We're going to be talking about the 7 practices of great leaders. And I'll tell you, leaders, if you've been in the game for some time, you know it's not a sprint. It is a marathon. And so we hope to share 7 principles, practices, tools that you can implement and really fold into your life, into your leadership to help you gain the endurance and to really focus your leadership to make a bigger impact in the year to come. So Justin, welcome to the Thrive Collective podcast. It's so good to have you here. Welcome.
Rob, thank you, man. I'm freaking jacked. This is going to be fun.
Oh, brother, we are too. We're so excited to have you. So, I'll tell you, one of the many things that I have just come to really respect about you too is that you do this stuff. I mean, you've worked with small businesses, large businesses. Give us a little bit of your background and story in business. I'm really curious. Like, you and I have met, but let's bring the Thrive Collective up to speed. Tell us your story in business.
So I retired early from college. I played a little college basketball, and then I retired really early. And I just knew that, man, if I had to have a degree to do what I loved, I'd have gone and done it. But the reality is, entrepreneurs want action, and they want traction, and they want to see results. And that's kind of how I was, even as a college student. I'm like, man, I just want to get out there and have impact. And so I went and started an office from scratch with Edward Jones as a financial advisor, investment representative. That was back when I was 23. So from 23 to 28, I was offered limited partnership, I think in my 4th year. And I realized at that point, Rob, you probably have been there too in different phases, but you know what you don't want to do. And as much as I loved building like a financial services business, I love the people, but I'd rather have a case of gout than do another portfolio review in my life. And so I pivoted and I moved down to Elkhart, Indiana. I'm from the thumb of Michigan, a small town of like 1,000 people. And we moved down to Indiana, and my brother and I started a character and leadership youth mentoring organization called 5 Star Life. And he was the youth guy and I was kind of the business guy. So I took my Edward Jones door knocking experience and I leveraged that passion to meet people. And we started meeting people across the area that I live now, telling them a story of impact. Because when you think of like a 5-star hotel, that's like top notch. You know you're going to go to a nice place. We because of the impact my brother was having with these junior high students, he was a youth pastor before this. And I grew up, my dad was in ministry full time. And so we grew up a ministry family, but I was the black sheep because I love business. I feel like God has called me to business and I want to leverage my skills for that. And so, but I wanted to unite myself with someone like my brother who's having tremendous impact in kids' lives. So we started 5 Star Life with maybe 5 volunteers and a couple friends. And we grew it from 50 students to today. Seth is reaching 22,000 students a week across the country. And what we do is I left 9 years ago to become an entrepreneur, but it was helping get that thing off the ground was a passion of mine. And we taught 5 core values: courage, respect, integrity, responsibility, and sacrifice. And our nation, Rob, our nation needs to infuse hope into our country. And that's what 5-Star was dedicated to doing, is changing the culture of students, changing their mindsets. Everything starts and ends in our mind, right? So for 7 years, I helped my brother build 5-Star Life. I think when I left, we were impacting like 2,300 students a week. And I left because I got to a point, and this was honest to God truth. I was the fundraiser. I was the president of the organization. My brother was really the guts of the mission. I was his best storyteller. Like, that was my job. I was telling the story of impact, of life change, of transformation. And I got to a point where I was asking for money, and I started to get bitter. I started to realize, I don't think this is good for me anymore, because I'm talking to these high net worth people and I'm getting told no. And I prayed. When I got told no, Rob, I started praying, Lord, give me a business that I could be a major funder of this mission. And so within 2 years, I literally pivoted. I left 5-Star, not because of my lack for passion for it, but I wanted to build. One of my mentors is Stanley Tam. He wrote a book called God Owns My Business. He's 106 years old right now. I met him, and he told me a story of impact, because he was 93 years old when I was, I think, in my early 30s. And I asked him a stupid question. I said, Stanley, do you have any goals? This was a 93-year-old that I was asking this. He looked at me and he goes, huh. He goes, I had some. It almost like, he's like, dude, I'm 93. We don't have goals anymore. But he said, Justin, I wanted to give $100 million to the work of the kingdom. And he said, it was amazing to watch God grow my business. And I just was trying to be the best CEO I could be. He goes, to date, we've given over $130 million to the work of this one mission. And when I read his book and I got to meet him, that changed something on the inside of me. And I started to recognize, I don't need to ask people for money. I just need to be obedient to what God's called me to do, and God's going to provide. And so I've shifted my focus to build businesses, to fund a mission that I'm passionate about. So that's kind of why I went into entrepreneurship, and that's why we're talking.
I laugh because I'm so resonating. Like, business can be an engine of generosity, an engine of blessing, that when we as entrepreneurs, small business owners, and leaders accept and respond to the call on our lives to own and lead businesses, it can create a wake of blessing to our teams, to our clients, to future ministries that we support. I love it. I love it. I feel like, Justin, you are my brother from another mother, but the same daddy. So,
yeah, man.
So you worked. Go ahead.
So that journey was where I realized, when I left 5-Star, I literally was like, well, what am I going to do? And I knew that I had entrepreneurship. I had to figure out, when you start an office from scratch with Edward Jones, you're basically an entrepreneur. You're using their system, but you have to build all the relationships. You have to build your business. And then when I did that for 5-Star, same thing, new community. And I decided to bet on myself and say, I'm gonna build the skill. And I have a passion for coaching, for teaching, for speaking, and yet I love entrepreneurship. And I didn't want to just be a speaker. I wanted to live it. And so I started with John Maxwell certification to become a speaker trainer coach, just to get my wings on me. You know what I mean? To get some reps under my belt, to see how the master does it. He's written 120 books. He's spoken all over the world. And so I started learning how to take my passion for team and my passion for entrepreneurship and use it in my business. And then I created this Lead USA event. And it was basically a local leadership event where I'd get about 1,500 people to come in, and I'd bring in John Maxwell. I'd bring in Chris McChesney from the 4 Disciplines of Execution. I brought in Darren Hardy, publisher of Success Magazine. I just brought in a bunch of amazing leaders. And then I was obviously one of the speakers at the event, but we reached, one year I had, I think, 25 simulcast sites across the country, and we had about 1,500 people in the room. And it was a 10-month job to have a half day leadership event. And I remember talking to my wife. I'm like, sweetie, I can still do the speaking, training, coaching with my 7 practices of great leaders, and we can do this great event, or we can pivot to have more impact if I learn a new set of tools. And that's when I pivoted away from just the speaking, training, coaching to the EOS model, because it literally solves the pain points of every entrepreneur that I'm working with so far. And so that's really where I made the shift of, yes, I speak, train, and coach, but I've got a set of tools in my tool chest that help business owners get traction, and it helps them get what they want from their business.
Yeah, that's it. And EOS, and many of you who have tuned in to the Thrive Collective, Hughes Integrated, we run our business on EOS. We're a story brand agency, but we run on EOS. And many of the guests that we brought on this show are EOS experts trained to implement EOS in a variety of applications. In fact, Justin, you've done that. You've implemented for hundreds of companies, correct? I don't want to over-exaggerate, but quite a few companies.
I think I'm 20 session days away from my 500th session. So yes, I've been in a lot of rooms, and I've seen a lot of stuff happen, good and bad, because that's who us humans are. We have good teams, we have struggling teams, but everything is just an issue, and it's solvable as long as you're willing to keep taking steps. And one thing that I value greatly is that you can check the box of running with a system like EOS, but you can still miss having tremendous impact in people's lives if you don't really grab a hold of a couple of these practices. And it's really about your leadership skill set of, am I doing these things? And Darren Hardy, one year when I brought him in, every time I have these high-level leaders, I try to schedule some time in their green room so I can talk with them, right? And so Darren, just challenged me. He's like, listen, when you study a body of work, you should, write these 3 things down. Number 1, when you're reading material, am I doing it? Number 2, have I mastered the tool that I'm reading? And number 3, would my results prove that I've mastered it? Even as good as what EOS is, or any other system out there, or any discipline, am I doing it? Have I mastered it? And would my results prove that I've mastered it? Darren gave me that nugget, and I've held on to that for 10 years, because it is powerful when you can self-assess. The number 1 trait of the greatest leaders on the planet is their ability to be self-aware. And you and I have both read books or material that the book was amazing, and 6 months later, our life doesn't look any different. And so what I'm committed to, man, is we in America have an enemy. And that enemy is habitual mediocrity. And when you have leaders in charge of people's lives, in charge of businesses that could have tremendous impact, and when we at the top settle, because we're not intentionally trying to fall asleep, but that's the danger of mediocrity, is it's good enough. It's good enough. I just can't give any more. And when we settle for mediocrity in our leadership, it has an impact on people's lives. And that's really where these 7 practices came from, is I want to run like a freaking Olympic athlete to achieve all that I'm supposed to do. And lukewarm in the Bible, it talks about God when he says, if you're lukewarm, he'd rather you be hot or cold, because he'll spit lukewarm out of his mouth. Lukewarm is mediocrity. And when us leaders, when we settle for mediocrity, it's good enough, we don't realize how much impact that can have on people's lives if we're not running in such a way as to win the prize.
I love it. I absolutely love it, Justin. It totally resonates with this idea of stewardship of gifts, stewardship of talents, stewardship of abilities. If you've been entrusted with the gift to lead, you better lead well. In fact, I think scripture even says that. If you've been given the gift of discernment, then discern
Yeah.
well. I mean, all the different gifts and spiritual gifts that we've been entrusted. And so these 7 practices can help us to do that. So
Yeah.
I'm really, really interested in these 7. These are practices that you've come across, that you've implemented, that you've trained and taught others.
Yep.
I'd love to hear, a couple of these tools.
So the 7 practices are very simple. They're called practices because they only work if you practice them. They're not like a law. Like, John Maxwell, a hero of mine, he's written the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. Mine are not laws. They're simply practices. And like gravity, that's a law. Like gravity happens whether you do anything or not. Gravity still exists because it's a law. What I'm teaching are practices. If you can know them and they can still not be helpful because you're not practicing them. So I'm going to give you these 7 practices in that context. If I want you to ask yourself, am I doing this? Have I mastered it? And would my results prove that I've mastered these practices? And they're simple. They're not rocket science. We all know them. So the first 3 practices are what I would call foundational practices of any good leader. And usually any great operational system will have this baked in. Practice number 1 is you have to clarify the win. And clarify the win is it's a personal thing. It's a company thing. It's a department thing. And there's long-term wins and there's short-term wins, but you as a leader have to clarify what's the target? What are we aiming at? And in EOS, we have a tool called the VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer. That's a way to package all of the wins that make sense, that are important. In my role, I have an accountability chart. What are my 5 roles? That's me clarifying the win for the work that I'm doing. As a leader, we have to clarify the long-term and the short-term wins. And I say clarify the win because so many times we have these big, hairy dreams that are way out there, but it's so hard to touch and feel. I've even boiled my life down to daily and weekly wins. I want to know if I'm winning every day. And so you look at clarify the win, you're like, how do I know if I won today? Well, there's a handful of disciplines that I can look back and say, I did those disciplines. I spent the time doing those activities to be a better father or a better mom or a better team member or a person that takes care of his health or a person that's working on my finances. And so I do that work and I can say that I won because I'm clarifying my wins. The second practice is execute the win. It's one thing to know what you want. It's a whole nother thing to do the activity that will drive the result. So execute the win is really about me recognizing the actual activities that I do every day are how I produce the results. It's what I do with my time. And so I used to be a procrastinator, Rob. Like I had this massive habit addiction to procrastination to the point where I showed up late for my own keynote talk. Like you don't get asked to come back and speak very often if you show up late for your own gig. And so many of my teams and entrepreneurs, they're really bad bosses of themselves. So if you're a solopreneur, the first person you have to focus on execution is your own time. Before you lead anybody else, you've got to master your own time. So I literally took a time study. You've probably heard this tool before, but executing the win is, well, where is my time going? If I'm a nutrition coach, I'm going to ask you, what are you putting in your body? If I'm a fitness, like a strength coach, I'm going to say, how many reps at what weight? Well, if I'm an entrepreneurial coach, I'm going to say, what are you doing with your time? Like, what are the real activities? And you have to delegate and elevate to your highest and best use. And so I did a time study to evaluate all of my activities. And I had to start executing on what I would call those few critical functions that only I can do. And I had to stop doing so many other things. So we have to learn how to execute the win. And one way that I've done this, I'm showing you here, I have this daily journal And you can see I track my time. I create a daily agenda and I track my time so I can't hide from myself. Because the enemy is habitual mediocrity. And if I don't know where my time is going, then I can't evaluate it. But if I do the activity of tracking my time, guess what? I cannot hide from myself. And so me executing on the right activities with enough frequency to get the results, now I can actually, if I track it, I can actually assess, how am I doing with my time? Did I get done what needs to get done? Does that make sense?
It's powerful. I think of like is it the Hawthorne effect? That which gets measured gets done. With who did that?
Yeah.
Was that
Yeah, I don't know but I know the line you're saying.
somebody walked into the factory floor and just wrote a number down, and then the next was it the night shift came on, they saw the number,
Yes.
They wanted to beat it just because it was measured, it improved. Have you seen, I'm just curious, out of your time studies, have you seen that take place where you've improved how you've used your time just by measuring it?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I've seen multiple teams. I just talked to a team this past 2 weeks ago, sat down with them, and they were so dialed in on their leading activities, their scorecard. We call it a scorecard. I have a personal war tracker for my personal daily disciplines, and then I have a scorecard for my company. It's the same tool. It's just tracking different activities. And they were hitting at like 90 to 95% of all of their leading activities, and they improved their net profit by 43% year over year. And it's because success loves discipline. And when you're executing the right activity with enough frequency and you stop doing the lower value activity, then you are more laser focused. You produce more. And when you as a leader produce at your highest level, then whatever comes out of your mouth is more believable to the team below you, because you mean what you say and you take your own medicine. And so execute the win is the second practice. The third practice is celebrate and evaluate the win. And because I work with so many type A leaders, they suck at celebrating their people. They don't need to celebrate because they're just more motivated by progress and advancement. And so we have to do both, man. We've got to celebrate our team, celebrate the department, celebrate milestones, and recognize that we're incrementally getting better. We've got to be leaders that celebrate victory. At the same time, we have to be willing to evaluate lost opportunity, mistakes. And so many times, I grew up Mennonite, and so I call myself passive aggressive. Us Mennonites are really good at being passive aggressive. And so we don't do a good job of evaluating and getting the truth on the table when something didn't go well. We kind of sweep that under the rug, and we just get into this culture where we just have to celebrate everybody and give them blue ribbons for like normal stuff, versus real celebration when we hit tactical, tangible goals, and real evaluation when we didn't hit targets, or when we hit it, we're like, well, how do we level up the next time? It's being able to be the leader that knows how to celebrate and how to evaluate yourself, your team, and the overall organization on a very methodical basis. I can look at my life and evaluate whether I'm winning or losing on a daily or weekly basis. Pat Lencioni wrote that book, The 3 Signs of a Miserable Job. And in that book, he talks about the 3 key areas that we need to reduce job misery are anonymity, because nobody knows me; irrelevance, what I do doesn't matter; and the last one was immeasurement. And the inability to measure if I'm winning or losing causes job misery. And so if you're a leader, loud and clear, you have to reduce job misery. And part of that is tell your team if they're winning or losing by giving them some metrics.
Yeah, it's powerful. And in the team context, like I could see businesses going to revenue, profitability, some of the data points. There's also some like intangibles that are in here too. I'm just curious if you've navigated the intangible. How do you measure and celebrate some intangible like culture and things like that? Is there like a measurable tool that you use for some of that?
Dude, there are so many different types of ways to measure all the cultural things. What I would say is, where do you want a result? And what's the activity that if you did daily or weekly, that would help you move the needle to get a more tangible result? The difficult thing is I just want to have a better culture. And there's a town called Frankenmuth, Michigan. I met the matriarch. She was in her, I think, either late 70s or early 80s when I talked with her. And one of the things that they measured was number of thank you notes written from leadership to the level below leadership. And then they captured the number of thank you notes written. And she said, Justin, it has to be genuine, has to be specific from their boss direct to that person. And it's got to be handwritten. She goes, we have a number of thank you notes that we have to write. She goes, I just figure that if I can make my employees happy, our team members will make our guests happy. And they owned Bavarian Inn Lodge in Frankenmuth, Michigan, which is this huge, world-renowned facility that has amazing food, and it's the whole Bavarian Inn style, like, the big chicken and all that. But she's in her 80s telling me my metric is 750 thank you notes a year. She knows if she's winning or losing. She goes, I lead the charge. If you're an executive on my team, you've got to write 500 thank you notes. So again, that's just a metric. It's not the only metric, but where do you want to see your team improve? What's the activity or the discipline that you must perform, and measure that one? In measurement, when I was at Edward Jones, they told me 25 contacts a day was going to produce 10 new accounts a month. Like that was a part of a recipe. And so for me, it's recognizing what's my metric that I have to do that would tell me I'm winning or losing. For some managers, they suck at small talk with their people. And because they're so laser focused, some of them have to create a metric. I need to make 3 touches a day where I engage in a 5-minute conversation of just about how the person's doing in life. Like that's an actionable, measurable thing that will produce a result.
You mentioned Chris McChesney earlier on. I know I've read 4DX of Execution. And what we're talking about is an input. It's a lead measure. It's a lead you have control over that you can actually influence. And at Edward Jones, you can't influence 10 people signing up with you, but you can directly impact making 25 door knocks, I guess it would be, or whatever the equivalent is.
And so it's celebrating and evaluating those leading metrics that would tell you you're winning or losing. So those are the first 3: clarify the win, execute the win, celebrate and evaluate the win. Now you go to the next 4, and I would call these momentum building practices. So the 4th practice is use simple, direct, respectful communication. We have lost the art of using language that is simple. We like to beat around the bush. Simple, direct, and respectful. Some of us are better at just being direct, and we're like, yeah, I'll just tell them the way it is. And there's no grace in the language, and you put people on their heels, and it's hard to swallow when you're not the kind of leader that's simple. Make it simple. Don't talk above me. Talk to me. Like the best dads in the world, they get on the ground with their kids. They're not sitting up just barking orders. They're on the ground, rolling around, having fun. There's a heart connection. So simple, direct, and respectful communication. When you're the leader, Jim Collins talks about the level 5 leader, extreme humility and this indomitable will to have fierce resolve to win. Like the combination says, okay, I'm committed to winning. Because I want this team to win, I'm going to use very simple, very direct, and very respectful conversation to help you win. And so it's USDR communication. Use simple, direct, respectful communication. And you just got to evaluate, am I direct or am I beating around the bush? Because what happens when you beat around the bush, Rob? What happens?
Yeah, you confuse people. It's just a train wreck.
You go around the circle and you never hit the core of the issue. You waste an enormous amount of time, and you're wasting that person's potential because you're unwilling to talk about the hard things. So it's being willing as a leader to use simple so they connect with it. Simple, direct, attack the issue, not the person. Get direct to the point, and then be super respectful, because that is a human being you're talking to and they add huge value to your life. That's the fourth practice. The fifth practice, this is 4 words from a pastor friend of mine. He said, Justin, this could save any marriage. Refuse to be offended.
Wow.
We run so hard. We're so focused, and we're so focused on self. When you are offended, who are you thinking about?
Yeah, yourself. Yeah.
Yourself. And as a great leader, you have to stop thinking about yourself. When someone has something to say, we get offended. And guess what happens? Those team members stop telling us the truth. So we start to go blind in our organization because we are offended by what they're telling us. So we stop our ability to impact the organization, because when I get offended, you as a team member stop telling me the truth. And now we have an awkward relationship where it's just, I'm the leader on high and you're the doer. And you don't, I never have two-way communication anymore because I'm an offended leader. An offense turns into bitterness, and bitterness turns into apathy. And when you have an employee that you got offended one day, and so they stopped telling you the truth, guess what? They have fallen into this habitual mediocre way of performing because they don't want to tell the truth anymore because you don't want to hear it. But if you as a leader can refuse to be offended and let them say whatever needs to be said, then we can still roll through and solve any issue that pops its ugly head up, because we have a trusting relationship where when I challenge you, you don't get offended. And when you challenge me, I don't get offended. And so we have great dynamic, and we can have really strong conflict in our conversation because we're focused on the greater good of the organization versus it becomes an attack the person mode. And that kills culture. And culture eats strategy for lunch. And so if I'm creating an environment where people are getting offended, it's on me as the leader to solve that.
Yeah, I love that. I could see that being like a core value, for a company too. Like, refuse to be offended. Like, we're always going to expect the best out of one another. We're going to refuse to be offended. So we're going to embrace conflict when it comes. It's powerful. It's so powerful.
So one thing that I've my best friends, Rob, I call the term as they stab me from the front. There was a moment in time where my wife, this was back 8 years ago, where my wife looked at me and she said, Justin, you're miserable. She said, you're so miserable. She looked at me with tears rolling down her eyes. She said, you're not the man I thought you'd be when I married you 16 years ago. And then she said, you're not the husband I thought you'd be when I married you 16 years ago. And then she said, Justin, you're not the father I thought you'd be. And there was everything that she said to me, Rob, was 100% dead on. And I was avoiding the conflict. I would call a slight depression. I was stuck 9 years ago. I was stuck and frustrated. And my wife in tears said, Justin, you love your brother so much that you would never want to do anything but she goes, you're miserable. She goes, you love your brother. You love the mission. Everybody in this community knows how passionate you are, but something's going on the inside of you. And you know who's taking the brunt of it? She goes, it's our family. And refuse to be offended so that you can face every obstacle with a partner who will stab you from the front. Like those words, I wish I had the awareness to call myself out, but that's why we need people in our lives to say what needs to be said. So the sixth practice is remove the ripple. When my wife laid down that conversation and she said, Justin, something's got to change, she was giving me the truth, simple, direct, respectful. She hammered me. And that one moment, I can honestly say, Rob, I did not get offended. Like, I just soaked it all in. There's plenty of times in my marriage where I've been offended by something my wife said, but that moment, it was undeniably true. And I received it as she was my best friend. And she was attacking the root of the issue. And it wasn't me. It was what was going on the inside of me. And so we together attacked the issue and we came up with a plan. And actually, Rob, that's why we're talking right now, is because I started this leadership training company out of that pain point where my wife challenged me. She said, Justin, you something's got to change. We've got to start living a different life. You're in this, you're stuck. And I had fallen asleep at the wheel and habitual mediocrity was getting the best of me. And I said, not on my watch. I'm not going to be the father, the husband, or the man that my wife regretted doing life with. And so that was a tipping point. And I started to attack that issue and I started my company. And 35 days into the start of that company, she put her hand back on my shoulder. And she said, when I married you 16 years ago, this is exactly what I had in mind. Like having a relationship where you can attack the issues together and solve them. You've got the 6 practices, remove the ripples. Every team has issues. And when you don't remove those issues, they build up, they fester, they grow. And in EOS, we have a tool called IDS. Identify the root, discuss for solutions, and solve. But there's hundreds of ways to solve issues. The deal is you've got to get them on a list and you've got to solve them. And it's very difficult to solve them if everyone around you is offended and they don't want to hear the truth. It's very difficult to solve them if you're not willing to be simple, direct, and respectful, because you will dance around issues forever. And the last practice is own it daily. This is a practice. In this old story, children's storybook, it's the turtle wins the race. Mm-hmm. And it's what I own daily. John Maxwell says the secret to your success is found in your daily agenda. And I don't care where you want success, Rob, where you or I or anybody listening, wherever you want success, there are a handful of disciplines that you must own daily. If you're a person of faith, you can say you're a Christian, but if you don't own a handful of disciplines, your life will not look like you're a Christian. And so for me, it's own it daily. Like, what must I own daily? Because success loves discipline. I need to fall in love with discipline. That came from, you know where discipline comes from, right, Rob?
Well, other than my grandmother, tell me.
So somewhere in the Bible, I'm going to jack this up, but there's these things called the fruits of the Spirit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Galatians 5:22. Yep.
Love, joy,
yeah,
peace, patience, faithfulness, all these beautiful words that everyone goes, oh, yeah, that's so wonderful. You know what the last freaking word is? Self-control. Self-control. And because I'm a person of faith, I was hit so hard one day when I realized I did not see much self-control in my life. And that's called a fruit of the Spirit. Yeah. And so I decided then and there that I was never going to become the guy that had regret because he didn't own it daily. My mom grew up looking for love in all the wrong places. And she got into a relationship in high school where she met this guy and she told him she loved him and he told her he loved her. Well, he just wanted to get in bed with her. And my mom got pregnant with me. And this guy, when she told him that she was pregnant, this guy looked at her and said, I want nothing to do with you and nothing to do with that thing inside of you. And she paid my mom money to get rid of me. And thankfully, my aunt stepped in and told my mom that she could come home. My mom came home, gave birth to me, but my biological dad literally was trying to pay her off to get rid of me. And my mom tells me the story where for years she had the thought that if this is the best life has to offer me, she doesn't need it. And she almost committed suicide with my little brother in her belly, because she was believing this thought that said, you're damaged goods. You're just white trash. You're no good to anybody. No man will ever love you. And she had, given herself to another guy. She got pregnant again. And so she's put me to bed one night, walked down the hall with this repeating mindset. If this is the best life has to offer me, I don't need it. And she sat down in her bed and she grabbed a pistol and stuck it to her belly. And at that moment, right before she pulled the trigger, this one thought hit her. What's going to happen to that little boy down the hall? Who's going to tell him that he's loved and has a great life? And who's going to be mom to him? That's when my mom set the gun down. And I'm going to tell you what, Rob, we wouldn't have a perfect life growing up. It was rough. But one thing my mom did every single day from that point forward, she said, I might not have the best life possible, but I can own loving my two boys today. And the incremental compound effect of my mom owning us two boys gave me a shot at life. And then 6 months after she gave birth to my best friend, my brother, she met a guy, and this guy said, oh, I love you. And she's like, I heard that before. He goes, no, I love you. And I thought kids came after marriage, but I want to adopt your two boys as my own. And I want to marry you. We got to know my faith. And so like this guy and this girl, two broken lives, like my dad who adopted me, he smoked more dope than you can fit in your car. Like literally, he had a massive life turnaround. He was in jail. And he was told he was stupid every day. Like he'd go into the farm and he'd work and he was told he was stupid all of his growing up years. And the crazy thing is when he shifted gears, he said, when I have kids, I'm going to tell my kids that they're awesome. And so I'm giving you this family story because I need you to get something. You have a company that you're running. You have a family that you're trying to support. You have your own health. You have a bank account, and you need to own that stuff daily. And if you want to have success as a dad, success as a mom, success as an entrepreneur, I don't care how bad it's been. That's all in the past. What you can do right now is you can make the decision to own the activity daily that will produce a different result. My mom woke up and decided, I'm going to become an amazing mom. My dad woke up and said, never will I tell my kids they're stupid. Guess what I grew up believing? I grew up believing I was freaking awesome because my dad told me on a daily, habitual basis that I could accomplish anything. And then I translated that into basketball. My dad rebounded basketballs every day for probably 7 years of my brother and I's life. We both played college basketball because my dad owned the activity of rebounding basketballs daily for us two boys. There are activities in our lives, Rob, that when we own them, it will produce a result. And so the last practice is, as a leader, stop doing the activities that don't produce results. Start owning the activity that will get you the results you want. As a dad, as a husband, as an entrepreneur, as a mom, as a wife, what are the activities that you have to own daily? And that is you owning self-control. And when we live with self-control, success loves discipline.
Oh. Church just happened. As my good friends would say, that was church. Like, Justin, I got goosebumps over here. Thank you. Thank you for sowing the seeds of wisdom your experiences, your story, and being a wise steward of each of those experiences that God has entrusted to you, and for generously gifting them to the listeners of this podcast. I do pray that positive ripples, not the issue ripples, but positive positive ripples rather, do ripple out from this to be a blessing for others, because I guarantee you're not the only one who dealt with adverse circumstances in
Not at
early
all.
years. Chances are there's somebody listening to the show right now. And I will get teary just thinking about it, but chances are there's somebody listening to this show that has dealt with some adverse circumstances of their own kind. And in grasping the principles of what you just shared with us, we can take ownership and real agency. We can truly take ownership over the things that are within our control. And maybe it is a little kid that's in our lives, a child, son or daughter that we need to speak belief into. We can control that. It's a leading measure we can control. Thank you. All that to be said, thank you for your investment.
My pleasure, Rob. And I just want to leave with this last thought. You need to get a picture, whoever's listening, get a picture of the life you're currently living. And I want you to evaluate the current results that you have. And wherever you're not satisfied with the result, I want you to say, well, what activity should I stop doing? What's contributing to the lack of results that I want? Whether it's your business, whether it's your sales, whether it's your bank account, whether it's your relationships, what is not working? And then identify what of those things do I need to upgrade? What of those things do I need to tweak? What of those things do I need to stop doing? And then the next question is, what do I need to add? Sometimes I have to unlearn a bad habit because that's preventing me from being able to own the good habit. Maybe I have to unlearn a mindset that is holding me back. And so if you really want to freaking crush it in 2022, you need to step up and own the disciplines. And if you own little by little, those little disciplines, if you own them daily, that's why your life will change. The secret to your success, John Maxwell says, everything great is uphill. And so if I can be helpful on your journey, if you need help owning some disciplines, then please reach out. But Rob, God bless you for creating a space to help people grow. Because we have to grow. This is a discipline. Personal growth has to happen for us to level up our life. And sometimes we need to get our tree shook a little bit to realize I am not where I want to be, and freaking I got to change some of the activities so I can get different results.
Well, what a blessing. What a blessing. So Justin, if somebody does want to reach out to you, is there a best way for them to do that?
Yeah, they can go to my website, justinmaust.com, www.justinmaust.com, or they can just send me an email, justin@justinmaust.com.
Well, Justin, thank you for your investment today in this podcast, in this community, truly. And it's just been such an honor to have you on the show. Thank you.
My pleasure, Rob. Thank you.
So small business owners, entrepreneurs, and leaders, this is your show dedicated to helping you make more money, avoid costly mistakes in leadership and in life. And hopefully today is a big piece of that, but then also fully integrate your faith into your life and leadership. Stewardship is a matter of the heart. Like, take ownership and steward the resources, the time, the talent, the treasure, the people, the relationships, the opportunities that God's entrusted to you, to make the most of them in the year ahead. And I pray that these 7 practices help you do just that. Clarifying the win, execute the win, celebrate and evaluate, use simple, direct communication, respectful communication, refuse to be offended, remove the ripple, those issues, get rid of them, and own it daily. Justin, thank you. Thrive Collective will see you at the next episode.